It's The Real News. I'm Aaron Mate. Heading into this week's NATO summit, the prevailing fear among prominent U.S. media and political figures was that President Trump could possibly destroy the decades-old military alliance. But Trump went in a different direction. He ended the summit Thursday, claiming he has gotten NATO members to agree to a longtime U.S. demand, that they spend more on their militaries.
Tremendous progress has been made. Everyone's agreed to substantially up their commitment. They're going to up it at levels that they've never thought of before. Prior to last year, where I attended my first meeting, it was going down. The amount of money being spent by countries was going down and down very substantially. And now it's going up very substantially, and commitments were made. Only 5 of 29 countries were making their commitment. And that's now changed. The commitment was at 2%. Ultimately, that'll be going up quite a bit higher than that.
Now, some NATO members are already disputing Trump's claim that they've committed more. But regardless, lost in the anxiety over Trump's commitment to NATO is whether or not this military spending he's bragging about would be a positive thing, and how that money could be spent otherwise. Well, joining me to discuss is Bill Hartung, director of the Arms and Security Project at the Center for International Policy. Welcome, Bill. If we could start just by your thoughts on this question of, does NATO need to be spending so much money on the military as President Trump claims?
Yeah, as usual, Trump's numbers are all off. But as you said, the real question is, does NATO need to spend more? And the answer is a resounding no. If you look at the Stockholm Peace Research Institute stats, NATO spends $900 billion a year to about $66 billion by Russia. And even if you take out the United States, the top 4 European spenders outspend Russia 2-1. So if it's about money, there's plenty of money sloshing around in NATO. There's no need to increase it. But even beyond that, we're not in the Cold War anymore. It's not an issue of blocking, Soviet tanks coming across the border, or having, aerial dogfights, or so. To the extent that there's competition, it's political. Perhaps there's some cyber issues. Nothing to justify a huge increase in military expenditure. And if Trump wants to save money, what he really needs to do is end the U.S. wars around the world, because that's where the money's going. If that's his concern, it's not about getting NATO to spend more. It's about the United States spending less on this global militarized foreign policy.
In terms of Russia, just to throw out some more figures, the recent Pentagon budget that was pushed through Congress, its increase from last year is more than the total Russian military budget combined, right? And Russia, meanwhile, has been reducing its military spending in recent years, if I have that correct.
Yes, that is correct. I mean, there's questions that can be debated about Russia's role in Ukraine and its connections with right-wing parties in Europe and so forth. But as I said, if there was a spending race, Russia is far behind and doesn't even seem to be trying to compete. So you could pour all that money into Europe. It would probably mean more purchases of U.S. weapons like the F-35. It would probably mean that Russia perhaps would decide to increase its spending or spend more on nuclear missiles, or otherwise respond to what it might perceive as a new threat. But it certainly wouldn't make anybody safer.
In terms of the U.S. spending on the military, as I mentioned, the latest budget was an increase over last year. What are some of the things that we could be doing with that money instead?
Well, just the increase alone from 2017 to the new proposed budget this year would be enough to buy 2 whole State Departments. So you could double the budget of the State Department. You'd still have $40 billion left over to invest in nutrition and transit and cultural programs. If you cut it by 1/3, you could meet all of the infrastructure needs of America, transit, roads, alternative energy, over the next 10 years. So it's a huge amount of money that's being wasted. And, people forget that Donald Trump claimed he was going to be the infrastructure president. He's put no money into that. He hasn't fought for it. His infrastructure program basically is pumping up the Pentagon, which is the least effective way to build your economy.
So in terms of spending money on weapons, President Trump is in Britain right now, meeting with Prime Minister Theresa May. After he leaves next week, there's going to be a military trade show called the Farnborough Air Show in the UK. And Trump is sending not defense officials, as far as I understand, but actually his top trade official. And I'm wondering your thoughts on the significance of that.
Well, usually there's at least a little bit of cover for the fact that they use these trade shows as an attempt to sell U.S. weaponry. There'll be some defense officials, there'll be some discussions with foreign militaries. But Trump's sending Peter Navarro, who's his trade advisor, who's behind all the different economic policies, including the tariff policies. And so that's just a signal to say, we're only about selling. And that's what we're here to do. And security, other issues related, we're not really interested in. I think that's the main signal that is sent. And of course, at the NATO meeting, as he always does, Trump was bragging about the superiority of U.S. weapons. He talked about arms sales when he met with the Saudi Crown Prince in the White House. He talked about it when he visited Japan. So among other things, Trump is America's #1 arms salesman. And so sending Navarro, I think, is part and parcel of that. But it means that there'll be very little discussion of any kind of broader issues of security or even economic policy. It's going to be sell, sell, sell.
Okay, so speaking of economic policy and sell, 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 at the same time as he is trying to ramp up U.S. military sales around the world, he is engaged in this trade war, imposing tariffs on many countries, including key U.S. allies who he wants to sell weapons to. Is there a major contradiction there?
Yes. I think if you're going to insult countries and undercut their economies, it's going to be harder for them to turn around and buy your weapon systems or anything else for that matter. And we've seen on a small scale what's happened before this round of tariffs. There was a dispute with Canada over sales of civil aircraft, and they tried to slap big tariffs on bombardier planes. Canada turned around and canceled a $5 billion purchase of U.S. F-18 combat aircraft. So you may see more of that, as this trade war escalates. U.S. companies put a lot of money into building these weapons. They're also related to building defense relationships with the United States. So there's going to be a tension in the policy. In some cases, it may diminish Trump's ability to sell arms. In other cases, the deals may go through. I mean, certainly places like Saudi Arabia are going to still buy in huge amounts as the United States backs them in their brutal war in Yemen.
Bill Hartung, Director of the Arms and Security Project at the Center for International Policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on The Real News.